All right, here's a little off-season update for everybody except for Cubby, because apparently he thinks it's stupid that we like to have fun with fantasy football. I'll be honest, the only time I get the chance to talk to 9 of my closest friends is when we talk about fantasy football. It might sound dumb, but it's the only time that I talk to you guys, probably once a week, maybe twice a week, is we get talking about fantasy football, and then maybe we get an update about what somebody's doing, whether it's somebody getting a new job or somebody moving places. It's nice to keep that connection. So, fuck you, Cubby. What I'm going to get into is our draft order that we decided this last week with the crazy night of poker, and kind of some facts that I dug up and some research that I did over, I don't know, the last like week or two. I just, every 5 minutes that I get up, just been piling together some stupid stuff to see if draft order does it really matter when it comes down to it. And what I found out is that it doesn't. Either that it doesn't, or we just don't have enough years and enough data to really make it mean anything. So drafting at the number 1 spot, as you can see, end of season standings, on average, they finished second. Now, that looks like a great number compared to all the other numbers listed. The thing is, me and Tyler both had the number 1 pick the last 2 years and have won the league, so that stat is a little skewed considering it's only out of 3 years, this data. So 2 out of the 3 years, yeah, me and Tyler won, so I guess you could take that with a grain of salt and say that maybe the number 1 pick matters. But besides that, obviously win percentage doesn't always correlate to end of season standings. Anything can happen when it comes to the playoffs. So look at this table, analyze it a bit, but in the end it really doesn't mean too much. About all the numbers average between 5 to 7 end of season standings, which is right about midway through our league. And then for whatever reason, the draft order, pick 6, Matt Davis actually won it 3 years ago with pick number 6. So that data is a little skewed since we're only going off 3 years again. If you have one of the winners that won the Shiva in that draft order position, it skews the data. I just don't think there's enough facts just to back this up quite yet. And then also when it comes to the draft, I did some research. I have a different Excel sheet that I whipped up pretty quick that just shows how many players you had at the start of season compared to how many you played week 16 or week 17, whatever, the last week of fantasy football. How many did you draft and how many did you start the last week? And that does not matter. That data was even more just on par with everybody else in the league compared to winners and losers. There was no variant in the data at all. Drew Michael won the league, and he kept everybody except for one player, I want to say. And then me this last year, I traded every single player away except for Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams on my starting lineup. So it just depends. It comes down to how the season is going, how you manage your team. Honestly, if you have to manage your team a lot, switch them up. Then you'll have a higher chance of winning. If you don't need to change anything and you have great bench and great backups and a full roster that's complete and everything, do the Drew Michael strategy. It just depends on how you are as a player and what the season's coming down to. The draft does not matter too much. Though obviously if you pick like a moron like Ryan Smith last year, or you pick like a moron like Tom Lindholm, or what Cubby tries to do every year and overthinks it, you'll end up with a shitty team. It is harder to obviously work your way up with a shitty team, but it is possible. The draft is not everything. I would say the draft is about 20%. And then in-season management, trades, picking up off the waiver wire, I would say trades are probably 60%, and then the waiver wire can be the other 20%. Just because the waiver wire is really only good for the people who lose the first like 3 or 4 games of the season. Besides that, the waiver wire is not really useful for anybody else in the league. So kind of getting past draft and what it does or does not matter in season. We did determine the draft order, though. We have it set. We know where everybody is picking, who they potentially might pick, and who their potential keepers are as well. What the picks tell you is Josh Kerr wanted to pick first, which means he's not keeping Ezekiel Elliott. but that means that he'll probably draft Ezekiel Elliott because Saquon Barkley's going to Ryan Naughton. Josh Kerr is probably going to keep Travis Kelce, which means I think he gets him in the second or third round, which is a great keeper because that's for sure the number one tight end coming into this next season. So Josh Kerr, Ryan Smith, Drew Michael, Ross Davis, Cubby, Jake Kerr, Matt Davis, Tyler Colin, Kevin Davis, Ryan Naughton is our draft order. And kind of a fun thing that I thought I would do is based on what pick you selected, I am going to predict the first round and how it will go. This is obviously not going to be accurate, and we can laugh about it later after draft day about how wrong I was, but this is just a fun, way too early first round predictions. I mean, they're already projecting the NFL draft for next year, and that's just stupid because, I mean, they can predict it the day before. They have no idea who people are going to pick. I didn't see anybody's draft board of the Giants picking that Duke quarterback. So let's go ahead. This is probably going to be somewhat accurate, though, because fantasy football is a lot easier to predict based off the rankings, since most of us are ranking slaves, pending injuries, or it's the NFL, so arrests. Josh Kerr, I'm saying he's going to pick Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott will not be his keeper again, but he's going to pick him because Saquon Barkley is off the board, and Ezekiel Elliott is a true workhorse back, probably the only true number one guy besides Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey, and possibly David Johnson. But Ezekiel Elliott is the best. He has the best O-line. I think he's also on the best team. I think Ezekiel Elliott is actually a better pick than Saquon Barkley this year. That's a personal opinion. But he's on the better team. He's on the team that's going to score more points. And he has the better quarterback. So I think Ezekiel Elliott will actually be the number one fantasy running back this year. So I think that's a great pick for Josh. And I think that is who he's going to go with in August. Ryan Smith, I am predicting that he will pick Alvin Kamara because after Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott comes Christian McCaffrey. But Christian McCaffrey will probably, most likely, be off the board. So I think Ryan Smith is going to go with the other workhorse back, Alvin Kamara, after trading Mark Ingram and Cubby being a dumbass. Alvin Kamara is a great pick here at number 2. Getting number 2, Alvin Kamara, I think is actually still of value compared to Cubby, who could have kept him. But, you know, that's another battle that we can talk about later. Number 3, I think Drew Michael will actually go with a surprising pick here of Le'Veon Bell, just because it is the other workhorse running back on a somewhat decent team, I should say a decent O-line. I think Le'Veon Bell is bound to make Drew Michael happy after upsetting him and destroying him last season. At number 4, I think Ross is going to go with Todd Gurley. This is surprising because many of you probably think Tyler is going to keep Todd Gurley. I think last second Tyler is going to think better of it and think that Todd Gurley, and I forgot the running backs that have come after Todd Gurley, but they all look good. We had that guy before C.J. Anderson look good. Then we had C.J. Anderson even look good. His little revival of his career. I think anybody can run on that system of offense that they have with the Los Angeles Rams, not the St. Louis Rams. And I think even St. Louis is going to figure that out and kind of say it's a committee backfield. We're not going to lean so much on Todd Gurley. We're going to put other running backs in that backfield. So I think Todd Gurley slips this far into our draft, and I also think Tyler decides against him as a keeper. Coming in at number 5, Cubby is going to give away Alvin Kamara to trade in for the injury-ridden Melvin Gordon. This guy has not played a full season since playing in the NFL. The most he's ever played, I think, is 13 or 14 games in a season. That's why Melvin Gordon will slip this far down to Cubby, just because he is a little bit injury prone. Usually I don't bet on injuries to happen, but when they're an injury prone player, torn ACLs, torn ligaments, or a strain in hamstrings, you got to go with the trends. So I think Melvin Gordon falls this far, and Cubby picks up a risky pick in Melvin Gordon. Coming at number 6, I think our first wide receiver come off the board because this guy and Devontae Adams are the true number 1 wide receivers. I don't think anybody else touches them. I would say Michael Thomas, but Michael Thomas is going to regress because it's Drew Brees' down year. So Drew Brees' down year, Michael Thomas falls a little bit. I think DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams are the number one guys. I think Jake Kerr goes with Hopkins just because there's really no difference between the two, but one is a Packers player. Coming in at number 7 then, Matt Davis grabs the number 2 wide receiver in Devontae Adams. Matt Davis in the past has loved Packers players. He has picked Aaron Rodgers twice and I believe Jordy Nelson twice. He's going to nab Devontae Adams and get that number 1 wide receiver that will battle with DeAndre Hopkins throughout the season. And I think Matt Davis will also keep Sony Michel as a solid choice at running back. I think he loses his like 7th or 8th pick keeping Sony Michel. So he's comfortable picking a wide receiver here. Coming in at number 8, I have Tyler Colin going with a surprise pick, picking James Conner. After last year, Tyler has a boner for players that he had, and he will select James Conner. After the departure of Le'Veon Bell, James Conner seems to be the only guy in Pittsburgh. Though he did get a little tired last year, I think James Conner in year 2 will be even better. And without Antonio Brown or Le'Veon Bell, I think Juju and Conner are both just going to have tremendous years. Coming in at number 9, Kevin's second choice of pick. Obviously, he wanted the 10th pick, but getting, 7th in pick order after poker night, he is happy to settle at number 9 because if Cam Newton is playing, Christian McCaffrey is Kevin Davis's at number 9, which is tremendous value. Christian McCaffrey is one of 3 workhorse backs in the NFL. He is an animal. His Instagram post proves that. The guy is just ginormous, and he is one of the great white running backs in NFL history. And then coming in at number 10, probably the greatest value out of any pick in the draft this year is going to be Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is going to come in at the 10th pick for Ryan Naughton. I do think Ezekiel Elliott will have the better year, but obviously Ezekiel Elliott's going to be our number 1 pick in the draft. Getting Saquon Barkley at number 10 and getting the 11th pick to go right after it is just simply insane. The keeper league, this is what it all comes down to. It should be very interesting moving forward with this keeper league. Remember that keepers lock 1 week before draft day. Keepers will lock that week before Labor Day weekend. So make sure those are in. Once you lock it on ESPN, nobody can see that technically besides me. Only I can see it because I have like league manager powers and I can like veto who your guys' keepers are. I don't know why I do that. You can keep who's ever on your roster, I guess, unless you're Ross, or I think Drew did it too. They picked up Le'Veon Bell and said they were going to keep him. Just don't be gay. All right. Getting into the 2019 offseason power rankings. These are the post-draft order and projected keepers coming into this next season. What this power rankings is based off of is where you're drafting and who I think you're drafting in that first round, and potentially who you're drafting then on the following round on the turn, and then who your projected keepers are based off where you're drafting. Everybody pick their draft order positions, so now you have a good idea of who they're keeping based on where they are picking in round 1, because it'll match up on whoever their top player was that they drafted for great value. So coming in at number 1, I have myself, simply because I sucked on poker night. I had the worst luck out of anyone on poker night, and I still got the second pick that I wanted. I wanted pick number 10, and Ryan Naughton got that from me. But taking pick number 9 is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I will probably keep Christian McCaffrey. Then in round 2, I'll probably get another running back or a wide receiver, who's ever the best available on the board. I love my position. I will pick before Ryan Naughton and after Ryan Naughton, and only Ryan Naughton. Ryan Naughton is guaranteed to make 1 or 2 shit picks in the draft, and I will pick up tremendous value before him and after him, round after round, just watching drunk Ryan Naughton get more and more pissed. By round 17, that guy will no longer be there. But coming in at number 2, I have to put Ryan Naughton. I have him rising in our power rankings based off of where I made the power rankings, I think about a month or two ago, and I think it was Ross that was up in arms about it. But coming in at number 2, I have him rising. Ryan Naughton has the best situation coming into draft day in August. He gets the number 1 player based off ESPN experts. I think it's Ezekiel Elliott, but Ryan Naughton gets the number 1 or number 2 player at the 10th slot. And then he gets the first pick in round 2. He gets whatever player he wants then in round 2 for the first pick in the second round. I also love Ryan Naughton's position because the turn, I love being on the turn. I love being 9 or 10. I love being 1 or 2. If you're the 1 or 2 spot or the 9 or 10 spot, I love being in that position and just nabbing 2 players. Nabbing 2 players that you can always count on and rely on. And you know exactly where players are going to fall. If you're at 4, 5, or 6, you kind of are caught in the middle of who's going to be picked round 1, who's going to be picked round 2. You have to reach for players. You have to, really work with the players that you want. Coming in at number 3, I have Jake Kerr. Jake Kerr I have falling because multiple reasons. Number 1, he got the 6th pick in the draft. And I don't know why he did that. Being the 6th pick in the draft, he's basically saying, I don't want one of the top running backs. I'm either going to reach for a questionable running back, or I'm going to grab one of the number 1 wide receivers. Number 2 reason I have Jake dropping is because of Patrick Mahomes. The schedules have been released. And I'm not huge on schedule releases, but there's another reason Patrick Mahomes is risky. The schedule release, and the Chiefs play the hardest schedule in the NFL based on opposing defenses. So that makes it a little more tricky for the Chiefs coming into this next season. Obviously, the sophomore slump, this is the second season starting, is always real. The other reason Patrick Mahomes is going to decline is because Tyreek Hill and Kareem Hunt, the 2 biggest offensive weapons on that team, maybe you can argue Travis Kelce, but Tyreek Hill and Kareem Hunt are very, very unique players at their position. Tyreek Hill is probably the fastest fastest wide receiver in the NFL. Kareem Hunt probably has one of the smoothest cuts in the NFL. Those are 2 key players to lose and then rely on Patrick Mahomes. Don't get me wrong, Patrick Mahomes is not going to take away anything because Jake keeps him. He gets him in the 16th round. You're not going to get anybody better in the 16th round. But his keeper does decline. I have Jake just falling 1 spot from Ryan Naughton, and I'll leave him there probably till draft day. Coming in at number 4, I have Josh Kerr. I have him rising a substantial amount because Josh Kerr got the number 1 pick. And he picked the number 1 slot in our draft. And everybody at first was in question about for a minute or 2, and then Josh says, well, I'm going to pick Ezekiel Elliott, and then if he's good this year, I'll keep it for next year. And then I'll have Travis Kelce in the 3rd round. Getting a true number 1 tight end, there's probably 1, 2, or 3 tight ends that are just game changers every year in fantasy football. If you lock up one of those top 3 guys, that's a position that you just don't have to worry about. It's great locking up one of those number 1 tight ends. And Travis Kelce coming into the season without Tyreek Hill is going to get so many more targets. He's probably going to be the number 1 tight end for the whole season. I love that keeper. I love Josh getting Ezekiel Elliott. I think he's the number 1 running back this year. I have Josh Kerr at the number 4 slot. I could argue him probably being at the number 3 slot. I just love his situation going into draft day. Coming in at number 5, I have Ross Davis. I have him raising quite a bit because I just love Ross's position after the poker night. He had a pretty good poker night. We know Ross always has a somewhat decent team, has made the playoffs every year except for this last year. And I just like his keeper, probably keeping the Colts running back in the very, very late rounds. I know he lost his 12th pick to Cubby, but honestly, the 12th pick is luck in the first place. There's probably comes 1 game changer pick in the 12th round every year out of the 10 teams. So I guess Cubby gets 2 of those picks now. He's got higher odds to be that guy. But I still like Ross's position a lot better of locking up one of those top guys in the top 4 picks. And I like Ross's keeper, so I have him at the number 5 position in our power rankings. Coming in at number 6, I have Drew Michael. I also like Drew Michael's situation because he had a great poker night, playing conservative the whole night, but it worked out for him because he was a top 3 pick now. Drew Michael's going to get one of those top tier running backs. I have him projected picking Le'Veon Bell. He can also go with James Conner is another pick that he can make. And then also, he can go with that top wide receiver if he wants, and DeAndre Hopkins. I love Drew Michael's position for draft day. Honestly, as you can tell, I like all 6 of the top people's positions for draft day. You can't be in a bad position because you haven't made any picks yet. But, you know, with the keepers and where you're drafting, I think everybody made pretty smart decisions on that front. And then coming in at number 7, I have Ryan Smith, actually. Ryan Smith can thank Matt Davis for this positioning because Matt Davis got Ryan Smith the 2nd overall pick in the draft. And this is just a breath of fresh air for Ryan Smith. I mean, after having an awful last season and really just questioning probably who his keeper is, I don't know who his keeper is. This is the only guy that I don't know who his keeper is. And so if he doesn't keep anybody, or if he keeps a guy, maybe he drafted a guy in between the 13th and 10th round, and he's just going to pick one of those guys because there'll be value of, you know, picking just a question mark player. He gets the number 2 overall pick, which means that he's going to get one of those top running backs. I would assume he picks Kamara because, I mean, he's an incredible player, especially on a Saints team that's going to rely on him heavily now without Mark Ingram. I think Ryan Smith just got a great situation here of getting that workhorse running back. Coming in at number 8, I actually have Matthew Davis. Matthew Davis I have here because, as I stated previously, Matt Davis is probably guaranteed a top tier wide receiver, a true number 1 wide receiver. He is guaranteed this year. And I've said this time and time again, I love that Matt Davis gets Sony Michel as his keeper. I love that. I think Sony Michel is just a great running back. For the Patriots, I think the Patriots liked him a lot last year. They were using him a ton in the playoffs, which obviously didn't matter for fantasy playoffs, but in actual playoffs, they used Sony Michel a lot. Obviously, they are Super Bowl champions. They do run a committee backfield a lot for the running back situation, but without the Gronk there, and with, you know, Rex Burkhead and James White just getting older, obviously they're not getting younger, I think they're going to rely on the sophomore guy a little bit more, and I think Sony Michel's numbers definitely increase. And I mean, what does Matt have to lose? I think it's a 7th round pick he wastes on that running back. So I like Matt Davis's positioning. I don't like it as much as other people, but obviously it's better than the situation he was in the Sacco Bowl. Coming in at number 9, I have Tyler Colin. I have him dropping a little bit in the power rankings simply because I think his keeper in the offseason has just been talked about a lot. Well, his potential keeper that I don't think he's keeping anymore is Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley just obviously did not have a good end of the season. I think that he honestly had a little falling out with the Rams, and I'm not super impressed about where Tyler is picking either. I think he's left with some questionable running backs, and he's picking after the fact of those 2 true top wide receivers coming. He has to either pick between Odell Beckham Jr. as wide receiver, Antonio Brown as wide receiver, or Michael Thomas as wide receiver. All somewhat risky picks. I would say Michael Thomas is probably the least risky, being on the same team as last year. Or he's picking James Conner or David Johnson. Both of those guys had pretty inconsistent seasons, so that's also a question mark. I think Tyler's the first position that doesn't get that for sure guy, and it's a big question mark at that position. Coming in at number 10, I have Cubby. Simply because I don't know what Cubby's thinking or what he's getting at with his positioning for the draft, like, at all. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make sense to anybody in the league. Everybody's just joking and being super sarcastic in the group me to him, and he still hasn't figured it out. But he's going to trade in. He's going to get rid of Alvin Kamara, not keep him as a keeper. That, first of all, just sucks because Cubby had the option to take the 10th pick in the draft and be on that turn. Cubby could have already for sure have locked in Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. Alvin Kamara, David Johnson. Alvin Kamara, James Conner. Alvin Kamara, Odell Beckham Jr. That would have been a lock. He could have had any of those two players, and I would have been like, that's a great team. That's probably one of the best teams. He gets two great running backs, a great running back, and a true number one wide receiver locked in. But no, Cubby is going to probably end up with, he doesn't get one of the top running backs. He doesn't get the Ezekiel Elliott. He doesn't get the Christian McCaffrey. He doesn't get the Saquon Barkley, and he doesn't get the Alvin Kamara now. He doesn't get any four of those true workhorse guys, the guys that you know. Obviously, one of them's probably going to get injured, or two of them might get injured. But you're not going to bet on injury out of any of those four guys because they don't have an intense injury history out of any of those four. So you're just going to bet on what's for sure right now. All four of those guys are the lead running backs. They're going to play 3 downs this coming year. Alvin Kamara might lose some to Latavius Murray, but Latavius Murray sucks. All four of those guys are for sure. And Cubby gave one up. And what for? Because he can take value for Calvin Ridley? Calvin Ridley is the third option on that Falcons offense. You have Austin Hooper before him. You have Julio Jones. I don't understand why you want the third option on that offense that was terrible last year. The Falcons were not a good team. I think they have the best chance to rebound, but I just don't understand why you'd want, oh, I could maybe possibly play him in my flex this week. Because guess what? Cubby in the second and third round is probably going to just get at least one wide receiver. And then in the fourth or fifth, he might get another wide receiver. Wide receivers are plentiful. I would rather keep a quarterback than a wide receiver. Quarterbacks, at least you draft in, you can draft them in the 17th round like Jake and get Patrick Mahomes, who's the running guy and a game changer every week. Wide receivers sometimes drop 0 or they drop 30. The top wide receivers, the true number one guys, are dropping 20 points every week. I don't know. I just am lost for words at what Cubby is thinking at this positioning. Now he's picking in the middle of the draft, the smack dab middle of it. I don't like his positioning at all. I don't like his keeper. I'm thinking about all that he lost out on. I mean, he lost out on Alvin Kamara and possibly David Johnson, or Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. Or I guess they're on the same team, so he probably wouldn't do that. But he missed out on Alvin Kamara, Antonio Brown. He missed out on so much just to keep Calvin Ridley. And for that reason, I have Cubby at number 10. He's the only guy that just doesn't have a for sure keeper or a for sure draft pick that I'm like, yes, I love that guy. For that reason, I have Cubby at number 10. And so that's kind of where I have everybody finishing up. Obviously, these aren't based on so much factual data that I have, but just the kind of opinions I have, the thoughts I have, the small amount of facts that we do have right now, I'm applying them to here. And this is kind of the power rankings that we have come up with. Thank you for listening. I will probably have a power rankings or at least an update sometime in June, July, or August. Maybe a little pre-draft video to get us all hyped up for Milwaukee. But we'll be talking in the group me. I'm sure some crazy off-season news has yet to happen. And thank you for listening. I'll talk to you all later.